This program is brought to you by Emory University.
This is Christine and Elizabeth. I'll start with Christine. Christine Suarez is a Los Angeles-based choreographer, performer, educator, feminist, and activist. She graduated from Emory in 1994 with a BA in theater and English literature, and went on to earn an MFA from UCLA's World Arts and Culture Department. Christine lived and made work in New York from 1994 to 2006. She's been supported by numerous grants, residencies, and national as well as international touring engagements. Christine's work encompasses evening-length dance theater pieces, site-specific events, and choreography for theater and film. She's created work in collaboration with all kinds of people, including veterans, seniors, teen mothers, and movers of all ages. Elizabeth Dishman is the founder and director of Dishman and Company, based in Brooklyn. She studied voice performance and dance at Emory and embarked on her professional career as a choreographer in 1996. Elizabeth earned an MFA from Ohio State University, and in 2001 she founded her company here in Atlanta. And I will insert that I had the great pleasure of dancing with Elizabeth during the founding years of the company in Atlanta, and always found Elizabeth to be deeply articulate and also deeply generous. And Elizabeth relocated from Atlanta to New York in 2005, where she continues her company's work as she raises her family's two children. So that's a tiny bit to give context to this dialogue, and I thought, since you guys are here both as alumni and so much of our audience are Emory students, I thought we would start, if you could talk a little bit about your experience at Emory and how it helped to shape your path or guide your decision to pursue a life as an artist.
Sure. I came to Emory with a background as more as a child in ballet, and I would always walk by the studio in Woodpeck and see the modern dancers rolling on the floor to the drums, and I was like, not for me at all. Was very not interested in that at all. And then I started to become interested in making dances, and I thought, well, I guess I should take some classes. So I decided to do a minor, and I had to take modern. So I signed up for Anna Leo's modern class, my first modern dance teacher. And surprisingly, it just tapped something very deep in me that was that I couldn't let go of. It was poetic, it was vigorous. It just seemed like such an endless form to me that was the end of it for me. So I couldn't get enough, and I'm very grateful that I was specifically here at Emory, because I think they have such a heart for potential in people and really zeroing in on each person, kind of where that person is and what seeds are there, already there, and also planting new seeds. So they were always, the faculty were just, their attitude was always like, yes, like more, yes. How can I help you do that? Have you thought about this? And it was just a total soul-opening time for me, getting into the dance world. And then after I graduated, I was like, I'm gonna do a show! And I just tried to do a show and didn't know how to do it, and kind of was like, will you guys come look at my work? And they just were so present, always available, and just savvy, and really knew me so well, so they were able to really speak into very specific areas of need for me as an artist and as a person. Both Anna and Lori danced for me in the early days as well, which was such an honor, and just I felt so supported again by them. And then Greg and George had also danced for me later, in the later years, when they both arrived. So I just felt kind of a well-rounded, holistic, like, based support from this community, and also just the faculty really helped me make connections that I would never have known how to make. So I think kind of ignited the dance for me in a really deep way, and then kind of helped me kind of push out into the world.
I hope you'll know how lucky you are to be at Emory studying with these people. I grew up in the South, and I was like ballet, tap, and jazz, and I have embarrassing pictures to prove that, boas. And I got a theater, like I got the theater bug, and I wanted to be, I didn't want to be an actress. I wanted to be a director. I wanted to boss people around. I'm the oldest child in my family. I tell people what to do, and so I came to Emory like really knowing I was going to major in theater in some way, and always really, and continue to be really interested in narrative and story and character. And so I did a lot of theater, I read a lot of plays, and I started to think, I don't know if I'd like just want to do a play. Like I want to make my own play, you know? And you know, when you choreograph, like you're starting from zero. Like you make everything up from there on out. And I felt like, you know, my first class was a jazz class from Gerald Ann. Is she still around? Mm-hmm. Does she still teach? Okay, so she was my first jazz class, and then I think my first modern class was Aldo Melito, rest his soul. I was telling Anna, I learned how to roll on the floor from him. And then it's such the dance at Emory is a culture of yes. It's a culture of yes. So whenever, I remember I was choreographing something, and I had found these, I worked in AV, like back in the day when AV meant like I brought out like a big TV monitor. And so I found all these porno films in storage, like in Candler, okay? It was like boxes of, I don't know if some professor was doing research, it was like boxes and boxes of porn. Yeah. Honey, it's research. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? So I start looking at them, and I'm making a work. It's like the first time I choreographed for EDC, and we were doing a show in Cannon Chapel. Do you remember this, Lori? Okay, so I'm just giving you an example of what a culture of yes it is. So I decide I'm going to, being a young feminist and being like, I'm going to show it. I'm radical. I'm, you know, this is what dance can be, people. And so and being AV, I could do this. I took the audio from some of the porn films, and then with a group of students, we made a piece. And all about the female body, and with this idea, there's this soundscape of this pornographic soundscape and so forth. So again, we're doing it in Cannon Chapel, and there was I think one of the organists there or one of the musicians there was like, you can't be doing this in here. And my teacher said, we're going to take care of this. And they didn't. They just took care of it, and they advocated for me. And that was and that's when I knew, that idea of what's your voice? Let's make you more of who you are, you know? Instead of going to, there are certain conservatories where they're like, we want to make you a Cunningham dancer, and you should look like this, and this is what your work should be like, and blah, blah, blah. It was more like, okay, and I don't even, if I ever saw the videotape of that work, I would be horrified, you know, because it's probably a terrible work, but they still supported it. They were like, you are investigating something, investigate it. And I feel like that's what really inspired me of oh, I have a voice, and this is, I need to do this, and this is my life's work. And so I think that's Yeah, those are beautiful reflections. Thank you. I also have felt that great culture of yes and the permission to take risks. And it's really profound how that can set you on a pathway where you feel like available to risk.
Totally. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, where I went to grad school, the chair of the department literally said no before you got to the office. I was like, I want to choose, no. You know, like, it was hard. I had to be very yes in order to get a little slice of, you know, of like an interest in something. And and New York City is basically a big no. There are little yeses inside of it, but.
Well, let's fast forward a little bit to the work that you've brought here. And I just want to make sure that we learn about you kind of through that lens. So I'm interested in you just discussing a little bit the particular work that you're going to be sharing this weekend, and specifically if you could talk about your entry point into this particular investigation, and then what research looks like for you. Once you've found your way into a question, how do you inquire? What does that feel like and look like in your life and your practice?
Yeah. Okay. The piece that I'm bringing is called Fold Rhapsody, and one of the initial seeds came from a prior piece where I was using water, a basin of water and soap and a cloth, and then we just happened to kind of need to put a little tarp down for the floor. And I started to, I think I was just folding up the tarp one night after a performance and just like, I love this, it's so great. And that was kind of planted the seed of what I wanted to explore next. And I started having a flood of interest, like ideas and interest in materials, and not just sort of, oh, what can I do with this? I can do this, I can do that, but more like, what do these materials, how do these materials speak, and how can I mine from them something, how can I mine experience and reality or imagination, and how can I find resonance with this actual thing that's in my hands. So I started working with all these props, and my dancers, kind of each new prop I bring out, they're like, okay, great, do that. And, you know, gradually a few people will be like, I hate working with props. They're like, I just want to dance. But it became about that. It became about, okay, you have this limitation and you have this confinement, and I'm asking you to wrestle in that. And the whole process and piece became about where can we find the freedom within the constraint, and where's the beauty within this particular object. And so that, I guess that's sort of an overview of the piece itself. I set myself up for a hard journey, I think, because I decided to work with so many props and lots of little sections. But as an artist, I have a strong drive to find a sweeping arc in a piece. I tend to be more of a big picture thinker. So to work in these very detailed ways was challenging for me, and also very challenging to then find the arc or create the arc. So I'd say this was a really hard piece for me to make, and we premiered it in Brooklyn in January, and I didn't feel great about it. I really saw that, it was just an awkward moment, and Christine and I were just talking about how those moments can be kind of your treasures for leading you forward and pushing you on. So I think in some ways this could be a huge, important place in my overall trajectory. And then I guess I just set myself up to then wrestle with this material. I'm now wrestling with this dance that's in front of me, and how do I, even personally, how do I sort of find life and breath in this thing that has become really frustrating or has become too heavy laden. And, so I just think art does that. It makes you confront yourself. It makes you find new things in yourself that you didn't know were there. Some are inspiring, some are really frustrating or sad. So it's been an intense process for me, and I'm really happy to share it with you guys and people that know my history, and it just feels like a wonderful way to kind of like bring this awkward piece out in the world and like, here it is, and help me kind of feeling. I'm not sure if I got to all your...
Yeah, I'm curious,
points.
kind of as a follow-up, like, for either of you, what do you do as you approach frustration or failure? Like, even in a practical way, like, do you take a bath? Do you say, like, I'm never gonna do this piece again, and you just like shut that thing off? Or where do you find ways to recuperate and move on and move through?
I cry publicly, public crying. I did a piece, there's this thing, I did a showing of a work, and it was actually a solo that I did here like a couple of years ago, we were trying to figure out, was that 5 years ago or 6 years ago? Anyway, and it was a work in progress showing, and I was getting feedback, and someone just like really eviscerated the piece and was really talking, I felt really speaking down to me, and yeah, it was crushing. It was crushing, and but what it helped me do is that when I went back into when I finally like, I had a gig to do, so I had to come back into the studio and work on it, and I just tore it apart and started to hear what that person said. So much of feedback, it's like you don't really hear it because you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with that part of my work. I don't want to see, like, and I really heard it, and I tore the piece apart, and I feel like it made it better. But I was really, I was like crying, like, it was, I had to fall apart and then get it back together.
I would say a different side of the spectrum. I kind of go like, like a really long time. And I think part of that is like, I just check out because it is painful, and maybe that's like a coping mechanism of just like, I just gotta walk over here for a minute. I play with my children because they're like, wow, what can I do with this stupid thing? You know, and it's their creativity is just in this like primal, like amazing place, and it's so healing and nurturing for me when I'm just like in the technicalities of it. On a practical level, that's one thing. But then I kind of just either give myself time, or I just sort of have to let that kind of wall that I find, that I put up for myself, like soften a little bit, and then, you know, maybe the next day, like I sleep on it and just say, okay, well, I'm gonna look at this, like, just like you said, like, can I hear from this, and is there something valuable in there? And a lot of times when it's so painful, it means there is something really valuable in it. I think the feedback that you get that doesn't make you upset is kind of like, well, that's not, you know, it's, at least that's how I feel, like the ones that are more gripping or just harder to get over, there's something there for you. So I try to just like breathe and give myself a minute to be like, okay, I'm safe. I'm okay. No, I can look at this, and I can find the resources to make decisions based on this, or really find a way to collaborate with the new information that I kind of was blind to before, was so resistant to.
I want to give you a chance to tell us about your solo performance. So tell us a little bit about where it comes from.
Okay, I think it was about like 5 years ago. My son was 2, and I wanted to start making something new. I had been invited to show something, like make a new work for this performance, and I went into the studio and I was like, I'm gonna go with no agenda. And I kind of kept coming, like, my life was so overwhelming, like having a young child and living in a city where I had no family, and being the primary caregiver for my child too. I just got into the studio and all I kept thinking about was motherhood. Just like what that is like and what this experience is like, and some of my angers against the paradigm of motherhood, like what I'm supposed to be and what I don't want to be and what I don't identify with, but then I do identify with. And so that was really like it just started. I had to make a piece or I was going to go cuckoo. And I feel like it's the first time actually, like, and I mean, honestly, like I've been making work for a really long time, and it was the first time where story and movement actually came together and really worked. I feel like it was a really watershed. It's a watershed piece for me. It was the first time where I was like, oh, it's working! Like, oh, it's coming together. And I also, like, luckily I worked with, I collaborated with music, a sound designer and a set designer and a costume designer. And so it wasn't just me, you know, it really like infused the work with really interesting information. So, I mean, our research was like, we went and saw surrealist feminine art, women surrealist art. That was part of our research. We went to the museum and saw stuff. And I like to read some, I read scholarship on, I read memoirs on people's reflections on motherhood. I read like boring scholarship on motherhood. I also, halfway through the process, I was like, I need to start interviewing people. And so I interviewed 50 women. I interviewed Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. You're quoted in it, by the way.
Yes.
You'll have to guess what you said. So I interviewed women because I was really interested in like, what are the other voices of motherhood aside from mine? Like I pretty much know what mine is, and I started to get tired of mine, honestly, you know. So that's really like, my sister's a sociologist, and I kind of consider myself like a dance sociologist in a way, you know. She would kind of be like, that's not real data, but it was data, you know what I mean? It was data. So I kind of feel like talking and reading and being in the studio a lot. I perform this work a lot, like a lot of work in progress stuff and full performances, and that also gives me information. That's research for me. A lot of time in the studio. A lot of time in the studio. A lot of time saying my text. Like, just saying it and hearing it and saying it and hearing it and really kind of calibrating it, you know? So I feel like I try, and I feel like that's what grad school gave me. Like, because I got the nurture at Emory and like the yes, the find your voice and dig into whatever you want to and your creativity. And then I went to New York and I learned more and explored more, and then I got to a point where I was like, I need to refocus. I need to just work on my craft of choreographing. And when I went to grad school at UCLA, and that's, I was like, finally I have the time to have all that level of research. Because when you're in your life trying to like make a living and make your work, and which are two different things, oftentimes. But in grad school, I could investigate the like, who's written about this, who's made other work about this, and like kind of hone those skills. So,
Both of you guys have talked a little bit about inserting what's personal. So, Elizabeth, you talked about like mining experience and the narrative, personal narrative and history, I think, is really forward in your work. So, can you speak a little bit about what you do with that in the studio? how you navigate the kind of vulnerability of people, whether it's like self or the dancers, and what you ask of them, perhaps. Yeah.
Sure. Sometimes I really doubt myself. And I have a real argument with dance and theater. It's like a constant argument. It's a constant argument of like, does this really work? Is this really worth it? You know, and like, I was just thinking, I was saying, as I was driving here, and I was saying I'm saying my text every day to keep it in my head, and it's like, do I really need to go into the part where I tell people I have a hemorrhoid? You know, like, because it's personal, and I start to edit, you know, like, do I really need to talk about my breasts? You know, like, because like, what are they going to think of me? Like, and I did that the last time I came here, and I did a piece about female orgasm, and I was so nervous, and I had performed the heck out of that work. Like, I had done it a lot. I had performed it a lot, and I was like, I don't know, it's students, it's the South, people are going to be offended, people are going to walk out, like it's a real, I wish I was a person who just didn't care, like, oh, this is me, to hell with it, you know, like, I still struggle, like, in that place, and, but for me, that indicates then I'm doing something worthwhile. You know, like if I didn't care, if I wasn't nervous what you were going to think about me, then who cares? You know, like, yeah, you know, she can really roll on that floor, you know, like, who really cares? And so I feel like when I start to have those fears of like, I'm going to edit my entire show today, and that's good, because I'm scared. And I feel like that scariness is healthy. And I continue to go forward. And you know, sometimes it's rejected. And sometimes it's not. And I have to accept that it doesn't matter. And that maybe there's one person that's moved. Then that has to be worth it. And everyone else could, I mean, I've literally gotten feedback of not real dance. Inappropriate. Like, that has to be okay. I mean, I'll get mad about it and blah, 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 but, like, I have to continue to be willing to offer myself. Like, you know, I always say to my husband, I'm like, are you okay with, like, after I've done pieces, like, I did this last piece I made talking about my sex life after becoming a mother, and how, like, my only pleasure is now chewing sugar-free gum. And he was like, really? Really? That sucks. And I was like, oh, are you okay with me talking about this? Like, and it's not really true. Like it's a fiction, it's a joke, but, like, it's not the same. So enjoy it now. But like, I'm just, the people in my life have to be willing. My poor son, I mean, as he gets older, he's going to be like, really? You have to talk about me anymore. If you talk about my penis one more time, I'm not coming to your shows. But, like, I have to be, that's what I got. You know, that's what I got, so.
Well, I feel like whether or not you're talking about sensitive subject matter or not, like, this, to make anything and share it with people is like the ultimate act of bravery, you know, especially when your body is your vehicle for exploration.
Totally. Yeah, I'm glad you went first, because I feel like I think my response is that in the moment of inspiration, I just sort of get carried into the idea and the experience of it, and I just know it's worthwhile. And then later, when you get a little perspective, you question it, you doubt it. Maybe people criticize or question and doubt. And then it brings about that whole cycle of re-looking at everything and trying to find the base of it and the core of it. But I think ultimately where I land is that our life experience is very precious and very valuable. And there's a lot of universality that we can explore together between audience and artist. And so that's really what I'm looking for, is a resonance between us, between this thing that happened to me that I'm feeling compelled to bring out in something artistic and aesthetic. How can it reach you, or what do you bring to it that creates like that resonance that's sort of in between? So I think that it is extremely vulnerable, I agree, and I do spend a lot of energy just processing that fear, and also, I don't know, just kind of, just get tied up in knots a little bit inside a lot. You know, you put a piece out, and even if it's well received, especially I'm an introvert, and so it's just that awkward, like, here I am, don't look at me, you know, it's very tricky, and I think that's the call, that's just our job as creators, is to just decide if we do feel like it's worth that or not, and I, so far, have continued to decide that it is, and I do believe that it is.
I'd love to get for you guys to talk about your creative practice, your time in the studio, what that looks like in your life on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, and then also just what feeds you. What keeps you questioning and coming back and curious for more?
I think for me, I don't know, I draw inspiration from many different things. Sometimes it's a story, sometimes it's visual art. Sometimes it is dance, but sometimes a lot of times it isn't. But I remember when I was an undergrad, B.B. Miller's company was in town, and I saw her work, and she was doing the piece, the Hendrix project. So it was all like work pieces of scored by Jimi Hendrix. And I remember watching that, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. Like, that's it. And then when I saw Joe Good is a choreographer in San Francisco, and like he's another like dance theater guy, and you're just like, oh, he's got it down. Like, he knows how this works, you know? And so that can be, but it's tricky with dance artists. It's like, so many times, so for much of my life in New York City, I felt like I saw so much stuff, and I was still so in development that I was like, I would think, like, what would Pina Bausch do in this moment? It's like, no, what would Christine do? And I had a teacher, Barbara Mahler, who said to me, do y'all know? Yeah, okay. Barbara. Okay, anyway, so Barbara Mahler, I'm hanging, like, you do this thing where you hang over your legs for like hours.
20 minutes.
And I was just about to go to grad school, and I was like, oh, you know, I commented on like wanting to dance like someone, and she's like, Christine, I hope you go to Los Angeles and you learn to dance more like you. I was like, oh, like that really shaped. I was like, oh. And I mean, I was 33, you know, like I want to dance more like me. And so I really feel like even in my practice, like I practice yoga with a teacher on a like twice a week. And I also do a somatic practice, so like it's like body, mind centering and Skinner releasing technique and improvisational forms. Because I really, to be in a contemporary class and to learn to dance like somebody else right now, it's hard. It's hard for me because that vocabulary then gets in my body gets confused. So I think that's kind of like what my physical practice is, and a lot of times like my creative practice, like unfortunately, it like starts with the money. Like right now, I'm starting a new piece, and I'm just writing about it and trying to get money for it before I start it. I used to start it and not have the money, and now I like to have some money and then start because it makes it easier. I did it so, like oh, the money will come. It's like maybe it won't, you know. So like I think writing about like the idea for a number of months, and then finally getting into the studio and starting to move around.
My process, so sort of early on when I'm getting ready to create a work, or maybe throughout the whole work, I'm trying to cultivate like big ears, like listening, and all my perceptors of like my eyes, my heart, like how can I be really porous to the impulses that I'm getting, maybe from my dancers or from materials. I go to see just as much dance as I can, and I just sort of try to let things wash into me, and then I think that I sort of sense that they sort of just pool up a little bit and become like a reservoir of resources and tools for me when I then start to create my own work. So that's one thing, and then practically speaking, I work collaboratively with my dancers, so I find people that are good phrase makers, that are have great partnering skills, and also have big ears and the ability to join me in that listening process and just cultivating their own sensitivity to the material that we're working with and the ideas. For this piece, we met once a week for 4 hours, which in some ways felt like a lot, and in some ways was not enough at all, but it was what we had. It's hard to find dancers who can really give you a chunk of time. So it was great, and I loved those really nice chunks during the week. I would come in with things I wanted to sketch, and we would sometimes sketch 10 ideas and just try it and be like, oh, that was way better in my head than it is out in the world, so let's let go of that, or that mistake you just made, we have to explore that more, that was incredible. Or then they would be saying, well, I was enjoying it from my perspective, but from the inside, we needed to talk about their experience from the inside. So it's definitely a give and take process with me and the dancers, which then matures through the course, the whole life of the work. Then by the end, where we have kind of these complex gems that we've found or cultivated, and then how do they fit together? And one dancer is feeling really uncomfortable in her solo. Let's talk about that. Why are you? Is it you? Is it this idea? Is it, what? Finding the awkwardnesses, and not just trying to gloss over them and like fix them, but really listen to them and again, sort of mine what's in there. And then just as producers as well, all the logistics, that's like, a whole other full-time job. So it's tricky, but I feel like it takes a willingness to, it's like cooking, you have like 10 pans on the fire and you're stirring, and then you turn the heat down, and then you taste, and then you serve. So
I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, keeping all of these things brewing in terms of your life. So giving the decision to have a company and how you structure that, and the risks and rewards of the way you've designed your life to work and be moms and be artists and wear all the many hats that you wear.
I initially started along the producing road because I just wanted to make it my own way. Like I really wanted to be the boss, I guess. I wanted to, I just wanted to be able to do it the way I wanted to do it and have the freedom that comes with that. And I was willing to then take the responsibility and the sort of crap jobs that also come along with that. I think as my work has grown, that's become harder because the work is not getting any smaller or simpler. So then all the sort of buttressing that you have to do for the work is also getting more complex. But I feel like there have been phases where I just complained and was just like, I cannot work this way. This is not okay. And then I still have to. But I think I'm getting to a point now where I'm more, I'm willing to do it, less in a sort of like, I just gotta make my work, I gotta make it, but more like, this is the tilling the soil. This is the, pulling out the weeds. Like that, it's just, there are unpleasant things about any kind of work. And so I have more of a like stable willingness to do it now, I think. And I also, having now lived some years with young children and trying to make work, creativity is powerful and it wants to happen. It really does. And it comes together. I mean, every show, you just like, this is the one that's just not going to happen. And my husband's like, right, that's right. You say that every time, and it just always comes together because it just wants to. I just think there's that inherent organic desire for life and desire for creativity that just keeps going.
I agree. I think whenever I start to feel scarcity, I have to remind myself that creativity is infinite, and that there will always be something else. I think balance is a fallacy. I don't think it really exists. I mean, I'm sure you feel it as students. It's like you're trying to have a personal life and be a student and be an artist and be a daughter or a son and a sister or a girlfriend or a boyfriend. It's like the idea of like true balance. Like nothing's ever balanced. Something is always tipped more in one direction. And for me, it's accepting that, okay, I will enter periods in my life with my family life that the family it's tipped more into family than it is in my creative life. And so I've had a lot of injuries with my body, and I went through a period right after I made this solo. The first time I performed this solo in Los Angeles on dress rehearsal, okay, I'm gonna dress rehearsal, my back went into spasm. I've had a bad back that has gone into major spasm throughout my whole life, like ever since I graduated from Emory. And so I felt like, so there's that also that like keeping your body healthy, and like I felt like my body really betrayed me, and I felt like everything was against me, and so I don't know, for me it's like accepting where the balance is, where the most is, instead of being, oh, I wish I was doing this, I wish I was doing this. It's like, okay, like there was a period of a year where I really couldn't dance, and I was just about healing. I went to PT twice a week. I was doing like my PT exercises every day, blah, blah, blah. That was where where the pot was boiling, I needed to take care of that. Meanwhile, it was like, a one-pot dinner that night. It was pasta with butter. That's it, So, for me, it's been that's kind of how I think about it. And my husband also, he's pointed out that, I've become, I wouldn't say not a nice person, but, a difficult person to live with while I'm creating something. And I've really worked on that too, Where they're talking to you and you're like, I'm not listening to you because I'm thinking about all this other stuff. But I think that's kind of my
Yeah.
point of view.
Yeah. I have more questions, but I'll start to open it up, and you guys have questions or places you want to take the conversation.
Yeah, I have one just about moving from city to city and establishing your community in each city, and kind of how you did that, and how it was different being in Emory and New York and LA.
Yeah, it's, I think every change you make there are real costs, and glorious benefits too. So I think that's a really wise question. When I moved to New York, I had built the company here for 5 years, and was getting really good press, was having a lot of opportunities, was feeling pretty great about the dancers that I was working with, and it was super intimidating to think about moving to New York. I moved for my husband's job, but also was exciting and wanted to do it, so we did it. And starting over, especially going from a smaller city to a bigger city, I don't know, I think for me, I had to be ready to be redefined and not sort of cling to what my identity had been here. I also got pregnant 3 months after I moved to New York, so I was completely redefined, and the identity shifted a lot for me. So in many ways, that was a blessing to just sort of, everything changed. So I wasn't trying to necessarily recreate exactly what I had had here, which you can't do. But, you know, community flourishes in the arts, I think, in any city. I feel like it does. And you find your people. You just really find the people that are drawn to similar things, or people that you have chemistry with. And you sometimes really have to look for them, but you find them, I think. And then again, I guess I keep saying this over and over, but just having those big ears, just being receptive and trying to be open to what comes to you. And also I wanted to say too about the frustrations when you can't do the thing that really is your desire. I agree that you gotta go where the pot is boiling, but also it's okay, let that frustration live too. And in some ways that has been my food of just like, I can't not do this. Like the drive causes a lot of frustration for me in my personal life, because it just is hard to try and do everything. But that dissatisfaction feeds me in a way that propels me to make work and really pushes me to go back to it. And so I'm grateful for that, even though it is a struggle.
You started something that, I think social media is a way to find your community, because you're going to know someone that knows someone in that new place, that you have a common person, friend, and you get connected with them, and then you start to see, like, well, what events are happening in that city, and you start going to those events, and you start to really see where you kind of fit in and belong there. And luckily, like, when I moved, I had, when I moved to LA is a tough place to find community, because in New York it's different, because you run into people on the street because you're walking and you're in public transportation, but in LA it's like you're in your car and you're like just isolated, and if you live in a certain part of town, you don't really go to another part of town because there's so much traffic, and so you're kind of like in your place. And but luckily, like, I moved there and I was in grad school, and so I found people of a common interest there. And what was interesting is, like, that idea of having open ears. Like in New York, I was always like trying, like I love narrative, I love moving, but there's always this community component of my work that I was really trying to connect with other communities, and it never really worked. Like, it kind of did and it kind of didn't, you know? And when I got to LA, the department that I was in was all about like social justice and community engagement, and there were people like Vic Marks and Dan Fruit and David Rousseff, like these people that were like really about making work in communities, and so I learned from them, and then I started to get these opportunities, and instead of, I'm prone to, if someone's saying like, hey, do you want to do this project over here? And I'm like, no, I want to do that thing over there, but they keep saying no. So I'm going to ignore you, and I'm going to go towards that thing that is not attainable. You know, like it happened to me when I was dating too. It's like, I don't, the person I married was like, I really like you and let's hang out. And I'm like, no, I want to be with the guy who doesn't call me back. Thanks. Yeah, because I need excitement in my life. So like I had this opportunity where like a psychiatrist at the VA contacted me and said, are you interested in creating a dance program for severely mentally ill veterans? And part of me was like, not really. You know, it sounds good, but I did it, and I found more and more, like, I love working with veterans. I love working in healthcare. Like, this is really interesting to me, and like all this, like this basis that I feel like Sally and Lori and Anna, like what the Bartenia fundamentals, like that's what I teach the veterans. Like this idea of connectivity, the idea of community, creative. Collaborating and creating something together. So that was like something that, again, I formed a community with veterans and healthcare workers at the VA that I never would have expected. If someone would, I would never envisioned that for myself, but then there I am, and I'm kind of good at it too. Like they like me and they enjoy it, and so it's acknowledging what's coming towards you, you know, has been, it took me a long time to get there, to get there. Yeah.
Other questions that are bubbling up? Yeah.
So you guys talked about how you enter into a work, and I was wondering if you could touch on how you decide when a project is complete and when you're ready to move on from it, and how you deal with the loss of letting that go.
Sometimes halfway through rehearsals, I'm like, I'm ready to move on. I have another idea. I don't want to do this anymore. This is a bad idea.
Yeah, a lot of times I think you feel like it's complete when your deadline comes. It's like the process could go on and on. Like when the show is supposed to happen, then it's done. But I think I'm starting to look at my work now as less of sort of like, you know, this piece and then this piece, but more like a long thread of a string of pearls or something, that they really are all related, and in some ways I'm making the same piece over and over, because I'm who I am, and so I think there is a grieving process. I mean, maybe I'll speak a little bit more concretely as far as like when you crash after a show, that kind of thing, and I think there's grief in there that probably comes from you're not just living on straight adrenaline anymore, and so your body, chemicals in your body just have to readjust and come back into balance. You have to remember, like, oh, this is what I love about my children, this is what I love about this other world that I haven't been obsessed with for the last however many months. So I think I have learned to expect that crash and try to just be gentle with myself through it, and process the real grief that it is to let go of a project. But you know, I agree with Christine. I think the ideas are coming kind of all the time. So you can trust that, you know, if you are a maker, you're going to still be a maker when this particular making is over. It'll bleed into the next one, which is a beautiful process.
In my piece, it premiered in 2012. So still doing it, you know. So in a way, it's never over, because it will change from performing it here. It will change. It will get new information, and I'll do it a little bit different because I have a little more distance from it now, and I can shape it. And also, like, I'm at a different place in my experience as a mother. Like, I'm not as angry anymore. I was really pissed off for like the first couple of years. I was like, this is it? Why didn't anyone tell me this? This sucks. It doesn't really suck, guys, but like, it was, I was like, this is not what I wanted to be. So I, like, in a way, there's a real beauty to re-engaging in a work years after you've made it, and you kind of have a fresh perspective on how to kind of engage with the material. It's exciting. It's a privilege, actually. Honestly, it's a privilege to take a work and allow it to mature, you know, because so many times it's like we do something, okay, next, and instead of thinking of like a body of repertory, a body of work that you can return to that's valuable.
What are the themes that you feel in your work now that you've been creating for this long, and also as for them, as we teach, we are trying to help them find your voice. So how would you describe your voice now? Like, what do you love about your voice? It is unique, so how would you describe it, either of you?
That's the hardest
Okay,
question.
so the voice, and then what was the first part is,
Themes.
The themes
Themes,
that,
okay.
you know, because your work, anything can trigger the idea for a piece, but the themes that keep running through your work. And
Well, I have a friend from grad school who is in the last new work I made. We premiered about a year ago, and she said, "Christine, you're a feminist," and I was like, "Really? Like, yeah." You're a feminist voice in contemporary dance, and I feel like that's something I've just come to accept, that like feminism and the paradigm of women is a big theme in my work. I think my voice is funny. I think it's irreverent. I think it tries to be honest. And it tries not to take myself too seriously. You know, I feel like that's kind of what my but I also am really interested in social and political issues too within the work. So I feel like that's really important.
I'd say common themes for me are vulnerability, both in terms of relational things that are happening between people in the piece, and also how the piece is reaching out to the audience, finding like places of tenderness and rawness in humanity, in myself, or in the dancers, in the body, and then also maybe on a more conceptual level, in all of humanity. My sister pointed out to me that almost every piece I do has some element of ambiguity, with specifically the idea of like, is this an embrace or a trap? And that I kind of play that out over and over and over and over again. I'm sure that's very Freudian for me. I know it is.
Something out, girl.
Totally out. I got a
Well,
lot.
you come out the other end.
Exactly.
Right.
I got a lot to say about that. So, and I'm also, I want to move a little bit away from this, I think, in my voice, but I do tend to, I want to explore concepts. I want to explore ideas, and I'm really questioning that right now. I think partly because this piece I'm about to show is, maybe is hampered by that desire, that it may be that dance is not the exact right medium for the conceptual things that I'm trying to work through. Or maybe it is. I'm not totally sure. You guys can talk to me about that. But so I think a conceptual framework is something that's a common theme for me. My voice, I don't know. I don't really know. I think that I tend to work in subtlety. I'm very interested in subtlety, and I'm interested in the power of it. I've grown, this is kind of a New York thing right now, so it may just be that I'm sort of absorbing that, but I've grown to work through a lot of neutrality in the face, so that I'm trying to let the materials be expressive of in their own inherence. So I'm not sort of pushing out like the emotion that I'm trying to get to, but I'm really trying to find the emotion in the task or in the workings of the dance, the physical materials or the props or whatever, or the music. I don't really know. You tell me later.
You know, I wanted, last night I taught a workshop and we were making a work about autobiographical work, and we read some text, and there's this quote from a feminist writer named Bell Hooks, and she talks about talking back and like where in your life you want to talk back. And for many, many years, I made work where I literally was going, I would literally be trying to say something and couldn't. And like I was working some stuff out, you know, like it was all about me being pushed down and not heard, pushed down and not heard. I mean, part of it is like how I grew up, and like I never felt heard. Like it is like I wasn't heard by my daddy, and like, you know, it really played out in my work, like not feeling heard, not being enough, not being good enough, and not knowing what I wanted to say, but kind of wanting to say it. And then finally, I could just speak. And then I could just say it. But like, it took years of, even auditioning for grad school, I did this piece where I whispered. I kept whispering over and over again. I kept whispering. And like, they were probably like, that girl, she needs to be here. She needs to talk. But it's kind of interesting when you reflect like on your work and how it does, like in many ways, parallel your life and your growth and your maturity, hopefully your growth, your progression. I have one other thing. So this was not even a quote that I heard him say. It was like one of the dancers I worked with said this. She's like, she took a workshop with Neil Greenberg, and who is a fabulous choreographer and a fabulous teacher, and he said, make your work more of what it is. And that just really like, oh. Because I always thought like, I want my work to look like who I idolize, you know? And instead of that, it's like, make it more of what it is. And I found that like whenever I get lost inside of a work, like what am I doing? What is this about? Like, oh, just make it more of what that is, instead of thinking like, oh, I wish it was, oftentimes for me, I wish it was more dancey. I wish it was more virtuosic, because I feel like that's what it's supposed to be, instead of just accepting like, all right, Christine, so this section you're just doing this. That's my movement, you know? Just like, that's it. And then just letting it be more of that. Instead of thinking, I should put some fancy rolls or something, and like, instead of it being authentically what it is. And I feel like as young dancers, it's like you have this virtuosic body, you know? And like, so it's like embracing that, but then also embracing what your body wants to do. You know what I mean? So.
I have one more question, unless there's a burning question. Somebody just has to. Okay. I would love to hear you reflect on the function of dance or your artwork in your life. So what does it do for you? What do you need from it? What kind of role does it play, or what kind of place does it create for you?
My initial response is it's like a amazing garden or play space. It's something where I can go and just get my hands in it, and I'm very fed by craft and aesthetics and just all the things that dance is. Nourishes me in a really deep place just because of how I'm made and my wiring and my background. But I think creating dance makes me feel like I'm a part of something bigger in the world, and it also makes me, and I also feel like I can create something bigger in the world. So it's both something I'm giving and something I'm just joining in with. I think there's a huge drive in humanity to be expressive and just take part in this glorious life and the materials of our world. And for me, my interest is movement and kinetics and emotion, and how can all these things flow together and create an experience that is shared and can resonate.
I really believe that dance is transformative, and I've seen that over and over again, and you know, I've been in LA for almost 9 years now, and I've worked with a lot of pretty volatile communities and populations of people, and I see the transformation happen, sometimes over months, sometimes over an hour. One situation that happened to me recently was I do training of different psychiatrists and social workers at the VA to train them how to teach this dance class, and it was a PTSD group, and it's about maybe 20 men, and we got reassigned to a smaller room, which was very anxiety provoking to a lot of them. So we're in this small room, and they do 30 minutes of talking and then 30 minutes of moving. And one rule in this class is that they don't talk about the past. It's about living now. But some of the guys, they want to rehash it. They just want to. So one guy starts telling this horrible story about about his friend being like blown up, like just a horrible story. Then another guy wants to top it, you know, and it was very tense in the room, very tense. And so the psychiatrist is like, okay, we're done talking now. Now we're going to dance, Christine. And I was like, ugh. And it really made me like, do I trust what I'm about to do is going to help them? And I was a little bit scared, and then I was like, I have to. I just have to trust. And by the end, people were smiling. People were connected socially. People were connected in their body. People maybe were connected to something greater than themselves. I don't know, but it transforms. And I feel like, again, like when I was younger, I really when people called me militant, I thought it was a compliment. I was like, I'm edgy, I am militant, to hell with all of you, I'm going to make my work this way, and it's going to look like this on the world stage. Literally, that I would think world stage. And now I'm in these like small, kind of crappy, kind of smelly conference rooms, dancing with men in their 60s, sitting in a chair. And that's transformative, and that is the world stage. And it like took me like a long time to realize that. I was like, oh, this is it. And we're transforming just through feeling our ex, literally, you know, or doing our marching dance. that we've learned, you know? We do a dance to Luther Vandross, you know, like, there's a rose in a fisted glove. Anyway, that it transforms, and I feel like that's what it plays in my life. Like, it plays this transformative joy that, like, I can go from depression, anxiety, to joy. And if I didn't have it, like, I don't know what I would do. I really don't know what I would do.
Well, we're about out of time for this creativity talk, but I wanted to encourage all of you guys to continue the conversation with these amazing artists. I know you can already tell that they have a lot to offer, and they're super smart and also very approachable, so they'll be coming in and out of classes.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.